Internal Air New Zealand documents predict it will be 2 years before the airline can hope to be back at 70% of its pre-COVID long-haul business. The airline is flying just 5% of its usual international schedule and is in the process of laying off 950 full-time cabin crew. It's already cut 300 pilot jobs despite collecting more than $70 million in wage subsidies and being extended a $900 million government loan facility. COVID-19 is bad news for the aviation industry, but it's rougher than Air New Zealand even thought. Taking one day in May as an example, it says pre-coronavirus, the airline would have been using 1,500 of its 3,000 cabin crew to operate its daily services. Now it's using 150 on its wide-body planes and just 53 on its narrow-body or single-aisle aeroplanes used on domestic routes. In redundancy briefing documents, Air New Zealand says the pandemic has decimated the aviation industry. An understatement, says aviation commentator Irene King.
It's just a phenomenal plunge in passenger carriage and, of course, obviously revenue.
In that same briefing document, Air New Zealand says it is flying at just 5% of its normal international capacity, and it won't be scaling up for a long time. Here's an extract.
We are now seeing the real likelihood we will be a much smaller airline for the foreseeable future, and that the recovery will be a lot longer and slower than previously anticipated.
Reiterating previous comments, Air New Zealand says a year from now it expects to be 30% smaller, and it's unlikely to see an improvement in revenue this calendar year. But perhaps most telling, it's bracing for a longer haul back, predicting it will be 2 years and not 12 months as it had previously thought to get back to just 70% of its pre-pandemic international schedule. Ambitious and potentially unrealistic, according to Irene King.
Globally, the international commentators are very gloomy. In Air New Zealand's scenario does seem quite optimistic. The estimates that I'm seeing globally at the moment is for every carrier, not just Air New Zealand, 5 years. International experts are thinking 5 years. And certainly, going back to that 70%, it's really tough to go from 70 to 100. Because that's an issue of confidence and confidence to spend and confidence in health and safety of travel.
Redundancy briefing papers to staff show Air New Zealand is considering a union proposal to cut cabin crew's daily rate by 7%, the equivalent of reducing fortnightly pay by a day. It's already been revealed that 300 pilots are losing their jobs, and the 900 still employed will take a 30% pay cut for the next 9 months. Air New Zealand's asked cabin crew willing to take leave without pay to come forward, but that leave has to be taken in not negotiable blocks of 12 or 18 months. The rehire process for furloughed crews is still being worked out. The airline has rejected a call for it to promise it won't outsource contracts for cabin crew on 787s for 6 years. Here's its explanation.
A guarantee on anything at the moment is just not possible. We are committing to jobs for our cabin crew by offering leave without pay. We are also committed to supporting our redundant cabin crew to return to Air New Zealand through the rehire process.
A grid of redundancies in the company documents is dominated by departures. All 98 flight service managers and 78 in-flight service coordinators are going. All 367 premium service flight attendants gone. All 316 Pacific class flight attendants gone, along with significant reductions across other cabin crew roles. And life at level 2, where domestic travel is back on, still might not be the lift Air New Zealand needs because of social distancing requirements.
I can tell you they will be going through money faster under level 2 with their current schedule than they are not flying at all at the present time. We know that social distancing is going to be a requirement on airlines. For an A320 can only seat at 65 capacity, and that's not break-even point. So they will be flying and losing money. If I was sitting in their shoes, I'd be asking government for some relief.
Irene, when you talk about relief, you mean a dispensation from the social distancing in some way?
Yes. If you want to see services ramp up, my belief is there's got to be two things that happen. One is you've got to have some relief from the social distancing requirements, and secondly, they've got to put in highly competitive airfares because they've trained us so well to look for those cheap airfares. And a lot of people will make the decision to drive and not travel by air.
There's one bright spot on a very cloudy horizon. Air New Zealand says it's secured a freight contract, a 6-week cargo charter. That means 10 flight service managers and 190 other cabin crew will get a reprieve for the duration of the contract. As for domestic fares, beware, Irene King warns, because cancellations are common, refunds are not.
Be extremely careful. I am concerned that they are cancelling services for economic reasons. I do have a fundamental problem with them not refunding the airfare. Now, to me, that's fundamentally wrong, morally and ethically wrong.
And Air New Zealand General Manager Network Scott Carr says the airline has been working hard to add to its schedule and is adding 7 more domestic routes at level 2. The airline has again declined to be interviewed.